Osceola County, Florida. We present together at ISTE a session about heroes and a project that we've worked on. We collaborated together. I work with elementary students and she works with high school students. And then we also do a session on comics. And this is sort of mishmashing the two together. So welcome, and hopefully Debbie will be able to join us in conversation as well. I have presented comics before, and so I'm not going to go into all of the fun details about building a comic within Wixie. Instead, I am going to give you the link. If you click on this, it will take you straight to the video of the pre-recorded video on or pre-recorded webinar about comics. And I will give you the link to this presentation in a few minutes. But let's do a quick little overview about why you should use Wixie for comics. And one of the reasons why I love personally is the speech bubbles. You can even use it to show thought. You can use it to show a banner, a transition. I just love the speech bubbles. You also have a variety of printing layouts, which we're going to see in a few minutes. You have a variety of backgrounds and filters. As a matter of fact, I was excited because I mentioned needing filters and Lindy quickly had some in there for me. So if you ever need something, join us on Wixie Wizards and just say, hey, I'm really looking for something, and Lindy will put it on her list, and who knows when it might pop up. And there's also all sorts of great creatures, but the students are encouraged to build their own people or imaginary monsters or even vehicles if they need it. So lots of great reasons to use Wixie for your comic creations. When we do this session about heroes, we start off with asking what makes a hero. And those of you who know me know I am a huge fan of comic books, the hero type. I love Captain America. I actually had on my Captain America jersey earlier and then decided probably was not what I should be wearing for a presentation today. But I love, love, love my heroes. And so usually when we're doing this project, we start off with, you know, what makes a hero? And the kids do name all of the different characteristics of these superheroes. And so Debbie is logged in. She is logged in as a team member. And I'm going to quickly flip back to the video screen just to make sure. Debbie, are you good to go? Are you on that page to start typing? Thumbs up? Thumbs up? She's not hearing me. She's not giving me a thumbs up. Oh, okay, I think so. All right, so what I would like you all to do is go off of mute and share some hero traits with us. What are some things that you would look for in a hero? And this is one of the things that we do with our students when we talk to them about heroes. Go ahead and get off mute and just talk, share. What are some hero traits?
Trustworthy.
Say that one more time.
Trustworthy, and someone else said courage.
All right, perfect. Debbie, you got that? I'll do trustworthy. Unless Debbie's not logged in. She may have been having a problem with that too. All right.
Integrity.
Integrity. Oops. All right. Okay.
Brave.
Brave, definitely. That's one thing I am not. Okay. All right, anything else you want to add to the hero traits? Okay.
Resiliency.
Definitely. Definitely.
Loyalty.
All right. Let me, hold on one second. Let me. All right. And loyalty. And I just misspelled a word, and that's okay. I am not waiting for typing today, right? All right. So we go through and we talk about the different traits, and we ask, do they have to be superheroes to have those same traits? And could a regular person have some of those same traits? And that's one of the things that the kids usually get hung up on. They think that a hero has to be someone who has shown bravery because they have superpowers, and they don't always identify the fact that they don't need a power to be loyal or to show integrity or to show courage, to be brave, to do the right thing, to step up. So getting those hero traits and getting them to talk about it, and then separating it from the superheroes that I know and love, and showing that they can be a regular person is a big to do, especially when we're working with as young as second graders And Debbie works with high schoolers who even sometimes get hung up on it because I think they go through that transition of going backwards sometimes when they're in high school. And then we talk about hero versus idol. And this actually was a very important one for us after the first year. The first year that we did this, we had a 5th grader who did a project about a little girl here in town. That little girl was seen as a hero because she went to the Women's March, the big women's conference up in Washington, D.C. She got a press pass when she was 10 years old so she can videotape and photograph the president and the vice president and the first wives. And so the student wrote about her being a hero and talked about that and talked about the Madison's time that she was on, oh God, now I'm going to forget the guy's name, Steve Harvey show and things like that. They totally missed the boat, and they talked about why you idolize Madison, and they didn't talk about her heroic things that she had done. Madison is a local photographer. She's a little bit older now. She's about 13, I think. But when she started with her photography, she was actually photographing little girls or boys with their dolls and or other toys. And she charged a small fee, but that fee was going right back into buying a toy for a foster child. And then she would do a photograph of that foster child with their new toy. And it was something that the foster child normally doesn't get. They don't normally get pictures of themselves, and they definitely didn't get a toy that was their own. If they had talked about that aspect of Madison, they would have seen her as a hero, but instead they talked about all the different things to idolize her for, about her getting to travel and getting on the Steve Harvey show and being on the red carpet for the Obama movie and photographing at the Women's March. And so they didn't really talk about the hero part. And that brought us into what are the acts of service. And so what are some acts of service? And we'll go ahead and go off mute again and share what are some different acts of service that you can think of. Anybody?
Caring for others.
Caring for others. Oh, you know what? No. The first one is locked, Debbie, and that's my fault. All right, so caring for others. Anything else you want to add to that?
Volunteering.
Volunteering, all right. All right, anything else? Let's get one more in there.
Teaching.
Absolutely. And you know, I'll tell you a funny story. Teaching doesn't always happen inside the classroom. 10 years ago, I used to take my 80-year-old cousin down to the Hard Rock Casino. That was her stress reliever. I hate the casino. I just can't spend $20 and feel good about it when I'm going to lose it. And so I would sit on one of the benches and I would end up conducting computer classes for the older people. They'd bring their iPads or their phones and ask me to help them with it. And so your teaching could be there. And I would teach little mini classes for free to these senior citizens hanging out at Hard Rock. So your teaching can happen anywhere. It doesn't have to be in the classroom. It can be anywhere. All right, so those are definitely acts of service. Now, one of the things that we're going to give you at the end is resources, including our Google presentation. And inside the Google presentation, there is a video that Debbie usually shares with her students about a little boy in India and a tree. And it shows how this little boy, who should not be able to move a big tree on his own, does an act of service and is a hero to everybody else in this current situation. I won't give the rest of it away. Instead, I'll encourage you to look at that later to get that. I'm wishing Debbie was on so she could share. All right, so some of the samples. And I forgot to put the QR codes on here, and I apologize for that. But we share these posters and we share these comics out in the community. Weeki Wachee, Winding Waters, I should say, I'm sorry. Winding Waters is an elementary school here in Weeki Wachee. They actually put the comics in their front lobby so that way parents could read them while they're waiting, or other volunteers, and they could read about the acts of good or whatever it was that their theme was, like the heroes, while they're waiting. The posters would get hung up around the community. I've seen them at Greek City. I've seen them in bathroom stalls at Wawa. I've seen them, seen the QR codes all over the place. So I need to get a couple of copies of those QR codes in different places. I have a picture of one at Greek City, but I don't think I got the others. Didn't feel right taking a picture in the bathroom at Wawa. But anyway, so here's one of the posters, and it talks about the food drives. And food drives have become really important, especially I know in all the different areas, but right now with COVID and different families being hit differently, money's tight and food drives are getting bare and they need those donations. And so the food drives, one of the places around here, they were very thankful that we had such posters up. They just wish that we had included where to donate. And I was like, okay, that would be something that we could encourage the students to include. But things like this would help the community just remember what they're doing. Now, this one does have the misspelled words. I struggle with not wanting to correct it. This is authentic. It is a second grader's work, and I don't want to correct it. Lily did this sample and she with her class, and so I didn't want to correct her misspelled words and things like that. I set up the food drive and I told her, I said, okay, now talk about why the food drive is important, and she did not copy the right spelling. So anyway, this is one sample of the food drive and just the posters, and why it's important and how it's heroic. Lily also did another story for me about the animal hero, and this is her brother Damien. Now this is set up as a comic. This is how it would print. I mentioned early on one of the reasons why to choose Wixie for comics is that it's a great with the different layouts. This particular comic is actually 10 pages and it's missing a page. That last page is actually the credits. One of the things that we tried to get, and I worked with Lily's class last year right before the COVID shut us down. And so since I'm still connected with her personally, I was able to get some samples from her. But one of the things that we drove into the students was if they were not using images of their own or not using images that came directly from within Wixie, from the, whether it was our stickers or the Pics for Learning, then they needed to make sure they documented the sources. And so she made sure on her final page that she mentioned that all these pictures are from the Facebook page of the Humane Society, and that her brother and her mom helped her download them and get them. Now, this particular comic, if you click on it, will actually take you to the document itself. So this is the story of an animal hero.
Yeah, I think I'm on twice now.
All right. All right. So, and then, like I said, you can read it a little bit more in the bigger screen, but when you go to print it, you can print it to 9 to a page or even 4 to a page. So that way it would divide it up and be a little graphic novel. I love this picture of Penelope. She's just a cute, funny cat. COVID hit and nurses were a big to-do. This particular sample that Lily did for us, she actually, one of the things I have to be careful with is making sure I have permission from parents on stories. And like I said, Lily is a personal friend, so I'm able to get her samples. She could have used more speech bubbles in here, and she could have used backgrounds. I asked her why she didn't use backgrounds, and she said the reason she didn't use more backgrounds is we only had one hospital picture. And I was like, oh, well, okay, we'll have to get some more hospital pictures. But she could have added some other elements to make it look like she was at the hospital, like a simple bed or an IV machine or something, and she could have drawn it. And so I asked her why she didn't do that, and she said, because I was at the doctor's office on my mom's phone, which points out Wixie can be used anywhere. And so that's why she also didn't do any more of the speech bubbles, because it was then her turn and she had to stop. So, but this one was all about why the nurses are important. I love this story because the very first thing she tells you is that nurses basically run the hospital. And she then goes through and tells you everything that a nurse does. They take the temperature, they check the machines that you're hooked up to. I can tell you from personal experience, they need to make sure those machines are hooked up properly and not flatlining. They keep track of symptoms and give medicine. The nurses give shots, and this is why nurses are heroes. So very simple. And this she plans on putting at the doctor's office. She goes back next week and she wants to print it out and she wants to leave it in the doctor's office for other patients to read, because it's a children's hospital, little children's office. And that way they won't be so scared of their nurse. And it points out nurses are heroes. Now, when we first started this project, we were not focusing on nurses. We were not focusing on doctors. We didn't want to focus on any of the fields that normally are considered a hero, like even the sheriff's department. Debbie's students, they did something totally different. Debbie, go ahead and share some of the different people that your students focused in on as heroes. And I'll go on mute so that way it doesn't interact with your volume.
You're going to have to unmute her too.
I don't know how to unmute. It's
or maybe she's going to have to unmute herself.
Yes, Debbie, unmute yourself. Can you? It looks like both of her is frozen right now. Okay, I'll go on. Debbie chose, her students were doing the linemen. When this project actually started, we were transitioning away from our military heroes. Debbie was working on a project with the Military Museum in Osceola County, and she was transitioning away from that and wanted to keep the theme of heroes still. My students were interviewing the Weeki Wachee High School students at that were cleaning up the neighborhoods after the storm. We had some hurricanes that came through and washed a whole bunch of nasty debris, including a porta potty, onto our shores. And so the students at Weeki Wachee High School went out there and cleaned it up, and the Winding Water Elementary students all interviewed them. And Debbie's students did the linemen, and they did other people that were supporting the hurricane efforts, whether they were locally supporting efforts. Originally, it was people that were supporting the Texas hurricane relief, and then we ended up needing our own. So it transitioned with Debbie's. So those were some of the things we first focused on. But with COVID, when we were talking about heroes, it became more of the nursing staff and the medical teams and food banks. This was another one of the food bank ones. When COVID hit, many parents lost jobs, and with schools closed, they had a hard time feeding their children. Not everybody was able to make it to the schools to pick up the meals, or they didn't get enough in those meals because the children were used to being fed breakfast and lunch. And some children don't make it to dinner because, you know, it's already a tight fit at home. And so schools were really very important to those communities. And so here it talks about how the Americans came together. Actually, let me just open up this one. The Americans came together to help feed all the different children and everybody, even the farmers, and how the restaurants donated food because they were shut down, and so everybody could still eat. And they talked about how food banks worked hard to distribute those in need. And I love the fact that they used, especially on this one, they used a very simple background and just lots of different props. You don't need a background in a comic. The comic is supposed to be focusing on just the littlest details can tell the biggest part of the story. So you can tell they're collecting food and it's not distracting. And so they say those who donated their foods, funds, and time are heroes, and thank you. And they continue talking about the grumbling. This was done by a 5th grade student that I've worked with in the past. And so I called on to them and I said, could you do me another sample? I need one that I can use, that I have the rights to use in a presentation. So they did one about the food banks as well. And then another topic, this was one of the older ones. I asked him to redo it inside of his Wixie account that I was allowed to use. Jacob is an 8th grader, and for him, this was not a food bank one, not a COVID one, and that's why I want to include it. And I like the fact that he was using real photos. But one of his favorite heroes is an air traffic controller, and he's actually met Stanley. Stanley's a real person. I don't know if this is Stanley's actual picture. I didn't ask him that, and I didn't get the citations from him, but I know that he has worked with Stanley, an air traffic controller at our local airstrip, because Jacob takes classes down there. Jacob says a plane could not land without an air traffic controller. You don't know how important these people are. They keep an eye on what's happening in our skies. I just had friends that told me there was a plane that crashed in Columbia, South Carolina today, and they were talking about how the air traffic controllers actually were very helpful in identifying it before it went down too fast. So he shares with you why this person is an everyday hero, and how they help with the pilots and they help with other people with the flights. So again, he used real photos and he used simple text boxes, and then when he printed it, it became 6 to a page to tell the story. So definitely something else that you can consider when creating your stories. And again, Jacob is an 8th grader, and this is not something that he saw as a kiddie project. He saw it as something relevant to his careers. It also made him feel good. He wants to be a pilot, but because of medical issues, that might not happen. And so he started feeling good when he was realizing that another possible dream for him is air traffic controller, and he would be doing some good. So he incorporated it with their career studies. We have lots of resources for you. Debbie and I presented this summer with the, I don't know why that's way down there, but that's okay. We presented with the Digital Storytelling Summit. I'm one of their execs, and so this is a link. If you click on this one, it should take you straight to, oops, the link's not working. I will get those links back up. This one's working. This will take you to our Heroes Without Capes, our whole presentation. And this one will take you in a few minutes, because I will go get the link and put it back in, our webinar on storytelling with comics. Those are not done only inside of Wixie, but that's my preferred tool for many, many reasons. And it's one of the better tools out there. I'll say that not just because I work for the company, but watch those. And then we have some other resources. This is our Google Doc that we put together for the DSN. It includes many different links that you can get to. One of my favorites is dealing with the comic strip library and the Daily Cartoonist. There are some resources there that you can definitely use to bring in the hero aspect of your comics to your students and get them introduced to it, and then how they can transition that from the superhero to your everyday real life heroes. And then we have some lesson plans in Creative Educator. My link's not working, I don't know why, but there are 2 lesson plans in inside of Creative Educator. We have the Everyday Heroes lesson plan, and there's a My Superhero lesson plan that we would love for you to check out. And I just have to find out why those links are not working. I must have not have saved it properly. So I'll bring those back in just a minute.
I put those in the chat window too, Danielle.
Awesome, thank you. I don't know why they're not there, but let me put this whole presentation in the chat. I will update it. So if you give me 15 minutes after the presentation's over, I will fix that and get these 3 links back on. I must have done something. It was something I did. But I will get those links back in there. So if you want to rewatch the webinar, you can, or if you want to get to those lesson plans, they're all in one spot. The lesson plan is probably also on this Google Doc. But there's some other samples down here of Wixie comic strips. One of my favorites is this Bay of Pigs. And another one that Lily actually did is this COVID-19. This is the one that I actually found inside of Greek City. I didn't know she had created this. So they were talking about classrooms. I think this is the right one. No, this isn't the right one. This is not the one I saw at Greek City. Where's the one? Achoo. That's the one I found at Greek City. I was gonna say that didn't look right. All right, so this is one Lily did last year in, I think it was April, and it was talking about don't spread germs. And so we were talking about PSAs at the time, public service announcements, which is another session we were doing. And she was talking about litter and why you should not litter. And if she picks it up, the dangers of picking up litter right now is because of all the germs. And so the yellow is all the germs from somebody sneezing. And then she said you should wear your mask and use a tissue and cover your sneeze, or just wear a mask. So when I was standing in line at Greek City to pick up my order, I scanned the QR code, and that's how I discovered there was a Wixie project. And she purposely chose that place because she knew it was my favorite restaurant in town, and I'd somehow end up there to see it. We did talk about story development on hers, and I told her some things I would have done differently, such as, achoo, spreading your germs, and then how when you sneeze, you get germs all over. I would just have added another slide or 2. But for her doing this on her own, I thought, that's a really cute little comic. And like I said, we had talked about putting QR codes out in the public for others to see. And so for that to happen, you'll see it. The class that I was working with, we have a few others, my dog during COVID, and the COVID-19. Those are the three that deal with COVID from the classes I was working with last year, the students who finished up before it was too late, before we got cut off of being told no more, no more outside working while we're on virtual learning. All right, any questions? Debbie, I'm sorry you can't talk.
Can I talk now?
Yes, you can.
Yay!